Deep in the heart of Barbados, a mystery unlike any other has whispered its secrets across generations, captivating all who hear it. The story unfolds where the Chase family vault became a stage for the unexplained, a chilling drama of chaos, revenge, and perhaps the supernatural. Thomas Chase, a slaveholder from Barbados in the Caribbean, was lowered down the steps of the family vault on August 9, 1812. Something out of the ordinary had transpired when the huge slab was shifted aside and the inside was lit up by the lamplight. It was already holding 3 coffins, and one of them was laying on its side. There was also a baby's body laying in a corner, head down. The grave had obviously been desecrated, it appeared. Strangest of all, no evidence of a break-in could be found. The tomb was resealed when the coffins were returned to their proper locations. Thomas Chase was a vicious and merciless man, and the white residents in the area knew it. They blamed the black workers for the violation. Interestingly, the coffin that was deposited in the vault just 1 month prior to Chase's was that of his daughter, Dorcas Chase, who allegedly committed suicide by starving herself in response to her father's harshness. It had been 4 years. Once again, the delicate coffin of 11-month-old Samuel Brewster Ames was discovered in a state of untamed disarray upon its arrival to the vault on 25th of September, 1816. All 4 caskets were scattered around the floor. 8 men had toiled to raise Thomas Chase's enormously heavy casket, which was encased in lead. The crypt was resealed after the coffins were carefully arranged once again. After being temporarily laid to rest elsewhere, it was reopened 7 weeks later to accept the remains of Samuel Brewster, a man who had been killed in a slave revolt in April of the previous year. The vault was in shambles once again, with the coffins strewn around in disarray. There was universal agreement that African-American slaves were the ones behind this act of vengeance. How had it been accomplished remained a mystery. There was no indication that the massive marble slab had ever been cracked apart and re-cemented. Instead, it had been securely fastened each time. One of the coffins had reportedly crumbled into planks due to its severe treatment. It belonged to Mrs. Thomasina Goddard, the first person to occupy the vault. Roughly bound with wire, they were set against the wall by the coffin. Coffins for children were stacked on top of coffins for adults due to the overcrowding in the relatively small crypt, measuring only 12 by 6.5 feet. After that, the vault was sealed again. In the islands, the story had now become somewhat famous. Unwelcome curiosity centered on Christchurch and its rector, the Reverend Thomas Alderson. He was understandably irritated with some of the sensationalists, but he was cordial to the rank and file by explaining that following the last defilement, he and a magistrate had searched the vault thoroughly to determine how the vandals had gained access. The floor, walls, and curved ceiling were solid and uncracked. Thus, there couldn't possibly be a hidden door. There was no way that flooding could have caused the problem. He was sure of it. The vault was dug out of solid limestone, despite being 2 feet below ground level. There would be evidence of flooding as well. Also, lead coffins, which are hefty, were not likely to float. Alderson, of course, disproved the local black population's belief that the tomb was cursed and that evil spirits were to blame. By the time the last burial rolled around, everyone was on the edge of their seat. Some sources place the conveyance of Mrs. Thomasina Clark into the crypt on July 7, 1819, while others place it on July 17, 1819. After much chipping, the door still would not budge from its stubborn adherence to the cement, which had been liberally applied to seal the vault. After a considerable amount of work, it was discovered that the enormous lead coffin of Thomas Chase was now pressing against it, 6 feet away from its original location. Except for Mrs. Goddard's wire-bound casket, every other coffin was disturbed. Would leaden coffins float on top of immobile wooden planks? This seemed to indicate that flooding was not the answer. Among the first to enter the crypt was the governor, Lord Combermere. Now he went ahead and ordered a thorough search. There was no concealed trapdoor, no method for floodwater to enter, and no way for vandals to force their way into the vault. This only confirmed what Alderson had already indicated. In order to make the tracks more visible, the governor had the floor of the tomb coated with sand before he had it resealed. Afterwards, the door was sealed shut once more. To make it even more difficult to open and bury without leaving a trace, Combermere even put his secret seal on it. On the 18th of April, 1820, 8 months later, a gathering was held at Lord Combermere's house. When the subject of the vault came up, as it often did. At long last, the governor made up his mind to find out if their safety measures had worked. The governor, rector, and 2 masons were among the 9 individuals total. They made sure the seals were intact and the cement was not disturbed. Next, the door was opened by the masons. On the steps leading down into the chamber, a child's coffin rested, while Thomas Chase's coffin was turned upside down. Undisturbed was only the bundle of boards belonging to Mrs. Goddard. The floor's sand remained untouched. In their search for an undiscovered passageway, the masons pounded the walls with their hammers once again. Lord Combermere finally had the coffins removed and interred elsewhere when it became clear that the mystery could not be solved. Following that, there was no one at the tomb. Despite extensive reporting on the matter, no one has been able to provide a satisfactory answer. The most logical natural answers would be earthquakes and floods. However, if the graveyard had been flooded due to severe rain, someone would have noticed. Additionally, flooding would have caused Mrs. Goddard's coffin and the floor sand to become disorganized. The same holds true for seismic events that can jiggle coffins about like dice in a wooden cup. Nothing appears to be more probable. Also, equally unlikely is an explanation based on supernatural forces. The burial of a woman who was thought to have committed suicide has allegedly sparked the disturbances. The prevailing belief is that the other spirits were unable to find peace in such a tragic event. The detectives are in agreement that a poltergeist requires an energy source, typically a disturbed teen residing on the property, because the coffin's movements point to this being the case. No such energy source can be found in a deserted tomb. Evidently, some thought voodoo was involved, that is, a supernatural power that a witch or witch doctor had purposefully summoned for the purpose of exacting revenge on the despised slave owners. It may sound implausible, but it really is the greatest option available.